buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
And live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. That's FM translator. Good morning and welcome to the program. It is the Michael Dukes Show, this Tuesday edition of the show after a very windy night. Holy cow, man. It was ripping around the house last night, stuff creaking and cracking and everything else, but no snow. Every day that there's no snow, I feel better about life. So it's all good right now. The Tuesday edition of the show means a couple things. We're going to be visited by Chris Story in hour 2 today. And in fact, we'll pick it up a little bit early with him today because today is Election Day. Election Day, my friends, for all your local elections. If you haven't gone out and voted, well, now's the time to do it. Go out there and get her done. Just jump out there and go do it. Go do your duty. Do the duty. He said duty. Just go out there and get it done and you know, do what you're supposed to. Otherwise, you got nothing to say. Nothing to say. That's in hour 2, though. We're going to be talking with Chris Story. In hour 1, it's Brad Keithley with Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets and the weekly top 3. Let's just dive into it right now, shall we? Get things going on and bring Brad on board to talk about it with us since he's right here, ready and waiting. Good morning, Brad. How are you doing this morning, my friend?
Michael, I'm doing great, and I'm glad to see you didn't blow away.
I didn't blow away. It was a close thing, man. It was kind of crazy last night. I mean, I woke up in the middle of the night and stuff was like banging and crashing. It was pretty crazy, but it's all good. It's all good. Brad, lots of stuff to cover today, so I want to get right into it. We're going to start off with a bang. Back to first principles is kind of the beginning. Who pays? Who pays is the multi-gazillion dollar question, Brad. Let's get started with it.
Well, Michael, I've been hearing a lot of pushback on the PFD argument lately about people who are saying, "Oh, it's free money. It's better spent on public goods. Why are you even trying to defend it? We all know it'd be better that we just let the legislature do what it's going to do and spend that money and bring us free things." And that's sort of taken me back to first principles about how you look at what's going on with the PFD and how you look at what's going on with PFD cuts. To do that, I sort of go back to some comments that Rick Halford, former Senator Rick Halford, former Senate President Rick Halford, probably the best connection we have this era has between the Hammond era and the current era. Some comments Halford made before a legislative committee a few years ago when he was describing the PFD and sort of describing the Alaska before the PFD and Alaska after the PFD. And Halford was saying, look, what we had were taxes before the PFD, before oil earnings. We had taxes. And we had, people, we had an income tax that was tied to the federal income tax. And we had people, people paying taxes based upon what they were paying in their federal taxes. And when oil came in, through the form of royalties and production taxes, and ultimately later came in through the form of using permanent fund earnings, when oil came in, that really was a dividend for people who were paying taxes. Hammond Halford at one point talked about the $100,000 dividend. And what he was describing was the fact that people who had been paying high taxes, $100,000 in some cases, people who had been paying high taxes suddenly got bailed out by all of the oil money coming in. And he said, what we forget about is that that's how you pay for government. You pay for government through taxes. People pay for government through taxes. And when the oil money came in, we just lost that connection and lost lock on it. To bring that down to the present day, what Hammond's vision was that once we were using permanent fund earnings, once the permanent fund was spinning off earnings, 50% of that would go to the people, largely benefiting middle and lower income Alaska families. And 50% of that would continue to be used for the purpose that Halford described when oil revenues came in. 50% would be used to subsidize taxes. Now, some people say, well, that's really to pay for government, that the 50% is being used to pay for government. It's not. It's really being used to subsidize taxes. And when you look at the economics of this, there's a split. 50% of the earnings going to government to subsidize taxes benefits the top 20%, non-residents, and the oil companies who would otherwise pay taxes, increased taxes, in order to pay for that increased government spending. 50% of the other 50% that goes to the PFD largely benefits middle and lower income Alaska families by being a supplement to their income. What's happening when we have PFD cuts is what's really going on is this. The 50% that Hammond said would be available for government, in essence, to subsidize taxes, isn't enough to fully subsidize taxes, to pay for full government costs. The 50%, that 50% pays it. We've expanded government spending so far, so high, that 50% doesn't cover it all anymore. And what's really going on here is that those who are subsidized by that other 50%, those who don't have to pay taxes by that other 50%, are suddenly confronting the reality that, oh my gosh, my 50% is already used up. I'm going to have to pay some taxes. I'm going to have to bear some costs of this increased government spending that I'm going on. I don't want to do that. And so their response to that is not to push against government spending. I mean, you never saw Natasha, or you never see Bert really pushing against government spending, is not to push back against government spending and say, don't spend any more because I don't want to pay for it through taxes. What you see them doing is saying, oh, there's this other 50% over here that's being distributed largely to the benefit of middle and lower income Alaska families. And I'm going to go grab some of that. I'm not going to try to stop the problem, which is increased government spending. I'm going to increase my subsidy against that government spending by going and grabbing free money and use it as an additional subsidy against those increased costs of government.
Right.
And that's really what the struggle is here. People who say they're against free money going to Alaska families, really all that's going on is they want more of the free money for themselves. They want to use that free money to continue to subsidize their taxes, to continue to have the $100,000 dividend that Rick described. They want to continue to use that money to keep them in a tax-free haven and continue to use that free money to continue to dodge having to pay taxes. Well, some people will then push back and say, oh, well, but the other 80% would have to pay taxes too. Yes. But we've done the numbers over and over and over and over and over and over again. And the numbers show that even a sales tax, which is the most regressive tax that you can think of out there, even a sales tax would take less from Alaska families, from the other 80% of Alaska families, than PFD cuts are. The other 80% of Alaska families would be better off getting their PFD, even if they have to pay some taxes. The ones who aren't are the other side, the top 20% non-resident oil, who would have to pay more in terms of taxes than they're suffering in terms of PFD cuts. And it's not really about, free money is better spent on government. It's really about free money. It's better spent subsidizing our costs, subsidizing taxes we would otherwise have to pay, than going out to the other 80% of Alaska families.
And justify to us the expenditures of those taxes, because then we'd have to be paying for it out of pocket.
Right. That's where it kicks in. I mean, if Natasha had to pay taxes instead of getting her full tax cost subsidized by taking money from the other 50%, if she had to pay taxes on that, she'd push back on costs. But because she doesn't, because she's been successful in increasing her subsidy by taking money from the other side through PFD cuts, she doesn't push back on spending. That's the entire explanation of what's been going on in Alaska in the 2010s and thus far in the 2020s. The increased government spending, we haven't had a decrease in increased government spending. We haven't had a slowdown in increased government spending because the top 20% who otherwise would be burdened by taxes have found a way to escape that by taking money from the other 50%. So when somebody says, it's free money, it's better spent on the government. No, what you're really saying is it's free money, it's better spent subsidizing the taxes I would otherwise have to pay on the increased cost of government. It's free money that's better used in my pocket than in your pocket. It's better for me to have it. It's better for me to have it and use that as a tax subsidy than it is for you to have it. And it's really, I mean, you can tell it irritates me when people use this free money argument.
Because we know better than you how to spend that money, right? I mean, Brad just used a lot of words to say what I've been saying for years. We have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. I mean, that's basically what it boils down to. But this is the avoidance. This is the avoidance component of it. We don't have to spend it because we can just take it from you without actually having to tax you and have you have an approval or actually have any kind of say in it. And so we could just continue the party on as much as we'd like.
Yeah, and those who say, look, the PFD is going to go away anyway. Just lean back and let it happen. That's where it's going. What they're essentially saying is, just lean back. The top 20% is going to continue spending. They're going to continue taking your money. They're going to continue subsidizing their taxes. They're not going to put a stop to the spending because it doesn't impact them at all. As long as they can take your money, as long as they can take the other 50% of the money to subsidize themselves, and we're just going to keep on letting that go on. Well, no,
right.
I for one, am not going to stop talking about it because that's exactly what's going on.
Yeah,
this is a struggle between two segments of Alaska citizens. One's trying to create this tax haven for the top 20% non-residents and oil companies, and the other's just being robbed. The other's being taxed in terms of PFD cuts. The other's being taken for a ride in terms of draining, their share of Alaska wealth. However you want to put it, however Randy wants to put it, that's what's going on. It's a shift out of the pockets of 80% of Alaska families into the pockets of top 20% non-res and oil, because they're not having to pay for the taxes for the increased spending that they're approving.
I think the most insightful thing you said today was the fact that they're just saying, lean back, don't fight it, just let it happen. What does that sound like? It sounds like that creepy guy with a Rohypnol is what it sounds like. And that's exactly how we've been affected by this. They just lean back, let it happen. Don't fight it, because because we know better than you how that money should be spent. That's the bottom line. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top three. We're going to continue here in just a second, but we are up to the break. So let's hit that. Number one in the can. Don't fight it. Don't fight it. It's just going to happen. We'll be back with more. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
I mean, I almost feel dirty at that point. Just lean back and let it happen. Just don't fight it. I mean, that's what I feel like right now. We're being eased into it so gently, so gently. We just let your betters talk. Let the betters talk this morning and do their thing. It's and of course it always comes back to the one and only thing that these guys want, which is just more, right? That's what they want right there. That's
trademark. I like that.
Trademark. You like that? Yeah, no, we trademark that. That's a trademark right there. What do we want? We want, that's what it's all about. So, but I'm 100% right, Brad. I mean, that's exactly what it comes down to. We want to avoid. We don't want. I mean, Harold said, you listen to what Brad's saying. He's describing the command economy. They want direct access to the resources by the government. That's why I've often advocated that if you really wanted to straighten this up, you just give the people the direct benefit of it every year. Give them all a check for $16,000 a piece, and then watch the whole world burn when you issued them a tax bill for $14,000 of that $16,000 every year, $14,500 or whatever it is, and then see how soon the government came to a screeching halt in the state, because people would be outraged. Wait, I just got $16,000 and now I got to give you $14,500. What are you do? What have you done for me lately for that $14,500 per person? Right?
Yeah. Well, it's and that's the very thing that Natasha and Bert and Click and others are trying to get you to avoid thinking about. They're saying, oh, we're doing good. We're spending it on the public. We're doing good. We're spending it on increased university, increase K through 12. All of these public goods, they're for the good of all of us. Well, if they're so good, pay for it yourself. Don't steal somebody else's money to subsidize your tax bill. Don't take money out of middle and lower income Alaska families. 80% of Alaska families don't take money out of their pocket to pay for it. If it's so friggin' good, pay for it yourself. Increase the burden on you at the same rate you're increasing the burden on everybody else to pay for it. And then you get, oh no, but it's free money and it should be spent on all these public goods. And I get to decide, I as a legislator get to decide where it's spent, and people like me because I get to decide where it's spent, and people buy me lunch, and people, invite me to groundbreakings, and people do all sorts of things that make me feel good because I get to spend it, but I don't have to pay for any of it myself.
Right.
Isn't this great?
Yeah. Well, and even Kyle, who we know is just in some cases wanting to stir the pot a little bit, he says whether it's a PFD tax or an income tax, it's collected from the citizens. When it's spent still in the government deciding how to spend it, the logic from both of you does not track, except for at least if it was an income tax that was something like a flat tax or something, there would be an equitability to it instead of heaping the burden on the backs of the lowest 80% of the income earners in the state. That's the difference. The difference is the diversionary amount here, where they're getting essentially the free ride in comparison with income levels. So that logic tracks as much as, you can't deny that.
Yeah. Kyle's a former legislator. It shows the problem that legislators have. They don't think about things distributionally. They don't think about how things hit by income bracket. At a gross level, yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, you call it a PFD cut, you call it an income tax, you call it a sales tax, you call it whatever you want. And at a gross level, you're taking the same. That's exactly right. But where the rubber hits the road is what happens distributionally, what happens by income bracket, what happens by industry segment. Think for a moment what the outcry would be if we said, we're going to collect all this money from the top 20%.
Right. The advocacy would change.
Oh, yeah, my God, we can't do that.
Yeah, the advocacy would change. They would not be pushing for programs that all of a sudden they realized that they had to be paying out of pocket for. And that is the big change that we're talking about there. All right, 10 seconds out, jumping back into it. Brad Keithley, our guest, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the stuff. Let's get to it. Here we go. 1 second.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Enemy. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Oh, yeah, that's me. Always a pain. Brad Keithley, also always a pain, joins us this morning for the weekly top three. The big three topics for this week, where we do the deep dive back into it. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the hypocrisy of this push for K through 12. And I saw this article in the ADN where they're basically saying, oh, this one single vote will now decide everything in the world. How a single education vote is shaping the races around the... and this is what they want. They want to push it on this single vote with no... What's interesting is that there's no shades of gray on this, Brad. It's either you voted for or against it, or you voted for it or you voted against it. There is no shades of gray. There is no other discussion. If you didn't vote for it, you hate children. Essentially, is the bottom line here. Give it to us.
Well, yeah. So it's an article in the ADN. It talks about how the vote on overriding the governor's veto, which was decided by one vote, and of course everybody's responsible for it now at every race. Everybody says, well, you were the vote that supported the governor. That was decided upheld the governor's veto by one vote to veto the legislation, the K through 12 legislation. And that's an issue in all these races. Here's the thing that bugs me about that. All these people who are pushing for increased government spending, talking about doing it for the children, doing it for Alaska families, doing it for the benefit of the state as a whole, that it helps out businesses because you have a higher educated population. It helps out the out-migration problem because you attract more people with a better education system. All of that, let's just assume for the moment that all of that's true. Let's just assume all of that's true. But then those same people, Janice Park is my latest blow up over this, or Walter Featherly. Then those people say, well, we're going to pay for it through PFD cuts. We're going to pay for it by taking money out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families only, and largely only, effectively only. We're going to take it by taking money out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families to pay for this public good of education. That'll, we're going to make them pay disproportionately, heavily disproportionately. We're going to make them pay for this public good that's going to benefit the top 20%. It's going to benefit the oil industry because, the oil industry is talking about we need a better educated workforce. It's going to benefit business because we're going to stall the out-migration problem. We're going to create a more educated public workforce. They want the public good, but they don't want to pay for it. And the hypocrisy of those running around saying, we need to increase K through 12, we need to increase this public good, we need to increase spending on this, but let's do it in a way where we don't have to pay for it, is just that hypocrisy is just grating. It's just huge. If you think it's a public good, pay for it. Pony up and say, look, we're going to have taxes for this, and see how far you get with that. Pay for it. Propose how you're going to pay for it. This sleight of hand of, oh, we need this big public good. We need all the benefits. Everybody's going to benefit from it. We're all going to be much better off from it. Families are going to be good for it. This huge public good we're striving for. Say how you're going to pony up yourself and pay for a part of it. And they don't do it. Janice Park doesn't do it. Walter Featherly doesn't do it. None of them do it. None of them have the guts. Well, with one exception, Agnes Moran down in Ketchikan. None of them have the guts to step up and say that they're willing to pay for a part of it themselves. It's a public good that we don't want to pay for. We want to shove the costs off on everybody else. And it's just
Right.
it's infuriating. If you think it's so good, then help pay for it yourself. Push a payment plan that includes you. Not shoving it off on everybody else.
Yeah, and the second problem with this is that there is no nuanced conversation. It's all or nothing. There's no shades of, well, we could do a little bit of this or we could do a little bit of that. We could talk about accountability. We could talk about, no, it's all or nothing, and we're just going to do it, and we're not even going to ask you how you'd like to pay for it. We're just going to take your PFD. That's the thing. I mean, it's a combination of all those things. What you're highlighting is the biggest component of it. But what always kills me is there is no nuanced conversation. It's $1,500 BSA increase or bust.
There is no nuanced confirmation because they don't have to pay for it, Michael. There is no nuance. I mean, if Jesse Bjorkman, if Walter Featherly, if Janice Park had to pay a portion of the bill themselves, there'd be a nuanced conversation. There'd be maybe we don't need, this we can do with that. Or maybe we can do that more efficiently without doing this. Or maybe, there's other ways to get funding in here for some of this. But there is no nuanced conversation because they're able to push the entire cost off on middle and lower income Alaska families. And middle and lower Alaska families are out there working. They don't have time to do the distributional analysis or analyze all this. They're just taking it. They're just, okay, take more. You're gonna keep doing that. But those who are doing this, the candidates do know what they're doing. And they know that they're pushing something that they don't have to pay for. They know they're pushing something that's going to push the cost in a way that's going to push the costs off on middle and lower income Alaska families. And it's just, it's hypocrisy to the max. We're not going to have a nuanced conversation. We're not going to have any sort of conversation about this as long as they can push the costs off on somebody else.
Right. Because nobody's fighting back on who pays. And this is just the latest. This just happens to be the latest shiny object. Education just happens to be the latest shiny object. If it wasn't this, it would be defined benefits. It would be some other kind of big state funding on something. Education just happens to be the latest vehicle, the latest crisis that they can't let go to waste to be able to push their agenda of more government spending.
Yeah, and that is it's the thing that they think they can go trick middle and lower income Alaska families about, right? Oh, it's good for you. It's good for your Johnny. It's good for your Jane. It's good for your family. It's good for your job. It's good for all this. So just let us do it. Just let us spend more to do it. We don't have to pay for it ourselves. We can push all the costs on you, but just let us go ahead and do it. I mean, it's a colonial state. We've got the upper crust in the state making the other 80% of the state, the middle and lower income Alaska families, pay for all of it, including their share, the upper crust share. It is as much a colonial system as the old British colonial system with the US. You produce the money, we'll enjoy the benefits. You produce the revenue, we'll enjoy the consequences of that, and we don't have to pay for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, what questions should we be asking these candidates about the education thing then? Because this whole article in the ADN, which by the way I posted up in the chat room for those of you who haven't seen it, if you wanted, it's at the Anchorage Daily News, and it's an opinion piece that talks about a single education vote is shaping legislative races across Alaska. What should we be asking with, for these legislators? I mean, who pays? Is that the main question here?
That's it. You hit it right at the top of the show. Who pays? Who pays? Who's going to pay? You're not paying. You, Janice Park. You, Walter Featherly. You, Jesse Bjorkman. You're not paying for it. You're in the top 20%. And you voted yourself, and those of you who were legislators last session voted yourself a pay raise, so you're always in the top 20%. You're not paying for it. Who do you want to pay for this? Oh, it's free money. It's free money, and we're just putting it to the public good. No, it's free money you're taking out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families, so you can have free money in your pocket by not having to pay your proportionate share of the costs of what you're pushing. That's what all this is about. It's all about getting more, as you say, getting more and more and more and more and more, but without them having to pay for it. With
And
them
again,
being able to push the costs off on everybody else.
And again, yes, I mean, I agree. Donna just said not all legislators voted for we know that not all legislators voted with a pay raise. Brad's not trying to paint the broad, with the broadest brush possible, but there are people in there that are doing it. And Brad, you're also highlighting why this is not strictly a Republican versus Democratic thing. We've got Republicans in there. Bjorkman is one who just want to spend more. It is the big government, more government crowd versus the less government crowd, essentially, is the better label, I think, in this discussion than party labels at this point.
It is. And it's the big government versus the small government. And there's an amazing correlation between the big government and the top 20% non-res industries in oil. They want more because it benefits them in terms of a more educated workforce, they claim, more people employed, more things going on out there, more contracts, more consulting contracts. They want more, but they don't want to pay for it. And there's a big correlation between the big government crowd and the top 20%, those who aren't paying for this by pushing the cost down to middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD cuts. Big correlation. And so, yeah, you got Republicans like Jesse Bjorkman, who's in the top 20%. You got Democrats like Walter. Well, he says he's an independent, but we know. You got Democrats like Walter Featherly, who are in the top 20%. You got Democrats like Janice Parker, who are in the top 20%. And they're saying, across the board, they're all saying, just spend more, but don't make us pay for it. Let us use PFD cuts so we can take it out of your pockets instead of out of our pockets.
Right. This is the Natasha model. Again, a Republican, but don't make me pay. Don't make me pay. Everybody else should pay. In fact, we had so much money, we didn't know where to spend it all at one point just a couple of years ago. And here we are moving forward. And I mean, you were right about one thing, Brad. If we continue in this direction, there is no PFD in the future. And that eventually will lead to taxes because they can't control their appetite, right?
Yeah, but it'll be taxes on the other. It'll be regressive sales taxes. It'll be the least burdensome form of tax on them. It'll be we've taken all your PFD. You don't have a cushion anymore. We've taken away all of your cushion. We've stripped away all of that to our benefit, so we don't have to pay anything. And now we need more. So we're going to do it in a way that takes more from you than from us.
Right.
and we'll just keep piling on with more and more and more.
Hope you feel good about it in the end. That's what it's all about. All right. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. The weekly top 3 continues. That's number 2. We're on to number 3. It is the fastest hour in radio. Brad Keithley returns with us in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
All right. Brad Keithley is our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. No, and I don't think Brad meant... Donna's like, not all legislators voted for the pay raise. I know, Donna. And I mean, Brad was, he tried to, he tried to point out that it's not everybody. Agnes Moran and Ben. I mean, there's a few in there, but golly, there's a few in there that are telling the truth, and the rest are all just grin and bear it, honey. Brace yourself. Here it comes. I mean, that's kind of how it feels with what we're doing these days.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's just outrageous, Michael, that we've got people telling us, I mean, it is the betters argument. We got people telling us how good we're all going to be, how well off we're all going to be if we just increase K through 12, if we just restore university funding, if we just do this, we just spend on that. Defined benefit. You're right. They've got them queued up. There's a bunch of stuff, bunch of spending in the queue that's just all going to pop up after they take care of one. How all we're better off with all those things, except not all of us are paying for it. Those who are pushing it don't have to pay for it, so it's a free good to them to push it.
Right.
So they look all liberal and all progressive and all. Aren't I really out there doing great things for Alaska and doing great things for the kids and doing great things for everybody? Shh, I don't have to pay for it.
Yeah. The biggest secret in the room is I'm not paying a thing, and I'll continue to advocate for everything that I don't have to pay for because, because again, we know better than you poor, pitiful children. Just pay attention. Don't look at this man over here. I know what I'm doing better than you. I mean, that's what it all looks like when it's all said and done.
You're having fun with your dials today.
Man, I know I forgot that I had this whole panel, and I'm like, this is great stuff today. I could do whatever I want. Harold, I think you're just trying to troll us all. Harold says legislators' pay is still too low. If you want some talent, you got to raise the pay to $200,000. I mean, we're not looking for professional politicians. We're looking for a citizen legislature. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for a citizen legislature. And instead, we've got professional politicians who want to spend all year finding ways to spend your money because you're paying them good money to do it.
That's what they think they've got to do, right? They've got to get out there. They've got to be proponents of spending money. And they've found the ultimate trick that doesn't exist in any other state. The ultimate trick is they found a way to push all these things and they don't have to pay for it themselves. It is the ultimate trick out there. So they get to do good. They get to go to all these groundbreakings. They get to, have shovels in their hands and look like they're heroic. They get to talk a good game about the university. They get to talk a good game about K through 12. They get to talk a good game about defined pensions, but they don't have to pay for it. And that's the, Alaska is going to die if we keep this system going on, because what we're creating is this super class that think they're entitled to everything and they don't have to pay for it. And look at the out-migration numbers. Where's the out-migration occurring? It's occurring in the middle and lower income brackets.
Right.
The top 20% is growing in this state. Right.
We talked about that a couple of weeks ago, how it's the working class that's moving out of the state of Alaska because they're bearing the burden. I mean, it's pretty much, you could see that right there.
And what's Chuck Kopp's solution to that? Spend more.
Yeah, exactly. Spend more. And no, Frank, I'm not saying that the citizen legislator should work for free, but if you're supposedly working for only really during the session, right? 120 days, maybe 160 days or 150 days, and you're making $90,000 a year, that's a pretty good deal. I mean, your workload in the rest of the year outside of the session should be pretty light. 1 or 2 days a month, maybe, if you're really, but you're making $90,000 a year to work for essentially 4 or 5 months. That's a pretty good deal when it's all said and done.
Yeah, and they're expanding their workload. I mean, they're going to conferences, or they're giving speeches, or they're doing something so that essentially they don't have to work. I mean, essentially they can live off the legislative salary. We've raised it in a way, and there's a lot of pros and cons, but we've raised it in a way where it's become a full-time job, even though we say it's not a full-time job. They make it a full-time job. They make work in order to justify that salary.
That's the nature of government, man. We expand to fill all available dollars, that, whatever it takes to expand our authority or our workload or our purview, because that is the nature of government. That is it right there. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. When I said ring the bell earlier, I mean you can go to YouTube and hit subscribe and then ring the little bell to get notifications when we go live. Let's get to it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Yeah. We got one more segment here. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. We're moving on to the number 3 of the weekly top 3. And it is you smell that? Smells like desperation. Desperation and sweat. Jesse Bjorkman is kind of reaching into the dirty tricks bag and is trying to throw some stuff and sling some stuff around. Brad, what is Bjorkman's desperation on display here?
Well, Bjorkman's distorting, misrepresenting what Ben Carpenter proposed as a fiscal plan. Bjorkman's taken one piece of it, the sales tax, and as opposed to the entire plan, taken one piece out of what Ben's proposal was, and said Ben's going to layer the sales tax on top of PFD cuts, on top of everything else. And so you're going to be having PFD cuts and the sales tax on top of that.
Right.
And when somebody starts misrepresenting somebody else's record that bad, it's a sign of desperation. It's a sign that they can't defend their own actions. So they're going to misrepresent the other guy's actions in a way to try to attack him, to take the spotlight off of his record. Here's what's really going on in that race. Here's what's really going on between the two proposals. Ben called everybody's bluff. Ben said, here's a fiscal plan, a whole fiscal plan that resolves the state situation. And as part of that, we get everybody contributing. We take the PFD, we set the PFD to one side. We don't use PFD cuts. We restructure PFD to POMB 50-50, and then we set it to one side. No more PFD cuts to fund government. Everybody has to contribute in Ben's proposal through a sales tax. He called their bluff and he said, okay, if you're going to spend, then let's structure it in a way where you're spending also, and let's structure it in a way where we've got some constraints on it, a spending cap, various other things that put some constraints on spending. But part of that is structured in a way where you spend, where you have to pay also. And Bjorkman can't defend that, because when you look at the numbers, when you look at Ben's 2% sales tax, it is better. Paying for government through a 2% sales tax is better for 80% of Alaska families. The amount taken, even if you assume that your entire income is spent in a way subject to the sales tax, even if you assume every penny that you've got that you earn is spent in a way subject to the sales tax, even if you assume that, sales taxes take less from 80% of Alaska families, middle and lower income Alaska families, than PFD cuts. And so Ben's proposed a way. Ben's really put up or shut up to Bjorkman. He's really proposed a way as part of his comprehensive plan. He's really proposed a way where he says, all right, Bjorkman, I'm going to take your spending and I'm going to pay for it in a way that's better for 80% of Alaska families. Bjorkman can't defend that.
Right.
He can't. I mean, the numbers are too stark. He can't say, oh, PFD cuts are better for everybody. They aren't. You can do the numbers. I've done the numbers. They're going to be in Friday's column, Friday's landmine column. They aren't. For 80% of Alaska families, sales taxes are better. So Bjorkman can't defend that. So what he's doing instead is misrepresenting Ben's position.
Right. Well, and it's actually working. If you go and look at Randy Daly's column over at Must Read Alaska, which is a defense of Ben Carpenter, and again, this is the plan from the Fiscal Policy Working Group. This was a bicameral, bipartisan commission that came together and came up with this plan and unanimously supported this plan. It was a full plan where one component, like 1/8 of the plan, was a sales tax or a new revenue component. So it's not just one thing, but it's working, Brad. If you look at the comments on that Must Read article, and that's why I recommend everybody who's listening this morning, go over to Must Read and comment on it, because there's a lot of conservatives up there who are upset. Oh, so he wants taxes after all, not understanding that there's a nuance to this, that he said he would not support this without an enshrining of the PFD. He would not support a tax without restoring a portion of the PFD and cutting government and all these other components, that it's just part. And that's the thing. We've gotten to the part where there is no nuance. It is all or nothing. And this is just what we were talking about in the education thing. He's basically saying, I started this conversation because we can't pass it all in one bill. So we've got to get pieces and parts out, but it's all got to come together. And I won't support this unless all these other things come into play. And it's better for Alaskans. But they don't hear that. They hear tax, and they immediately want to break out the pitchforks and torches. And why is Bjorkman doing it? Because as you could see in the comment section of Must Read, on some Alaskans, on some conservatives, it's working.
Yeah, he's doing it because he can't defend his own position. He's doing it because his position is flat out wrong for 80% of Alaska families. He's doing it because his position takes more out of the pocket of middle and lower income Alaska Kenai residents than Ben's proposal does. Michael, part of we've talked about language. We've talked about the Orwellianization of Alaska fiscal language. Part of the problem, I think, is when we talk about new taxes or new revenue sources. And that leads to the impression that it's piling on top of whatever revenue sources are already there. What we really ought to be saying in this, and me included, and I'll make this point in the Friday column, what we really ought to be saying is replacement revenues. Replacements that have a lower impact, replacement revenues that have a lower impact on 80% of Alaska families, on the overall Alaska economy, have a lower impact than what Bjorkman and others are proposing to do. It has a slightly higher impact on Bjorkman because as a member deep into the top 20%, Jesse's going to have to pay a little bit more if we have a sales tax than using PFD cuts. But for 80% of Alaska families, 80% of Alaska families, those in the middle and lower income brackets, a sales tax is proposed by Ben Carpenter, the broad-based sales tax that pushes a bunch of the burden off on tourists and non-residents and others. A broad-based tax like that takes less from 80% of Alaska families than, as a replacement revenue source, takes less from 80% of Alaska families than Bjorkman's PFD cuts. And Bjorkman can't defend it, so he's after misrepresenting things in order to try to, as a desperation move, to try to hang on to his seat.
And one of the things they continue to to ignore is the impact and the effect on the private economy. Again, this goes back to the disconnect between the public and the private economy, right? I mean, they are, they don't care. As long as the government economy is protected, they could care less what's happening in the private economy. Middle and lower class people, working class people are moving out. No big deal. We got more millionaires. We're okay. As long as they're there and the business is there and the service industries are there, we're okay because the economy is okay. The government economy, which is what we really care about.
Yeah. And the part that I want to keep adding on to that is, and we don't have to pay for it. Isn't this great? We get all this increased government goods. Jesse Bjorkman, a teacher, I get to save my job. I may even get a pay increase out of this on my government side, on my public education side, on my K through 12 side. This is all good. We get to save all this, and I don't have to pay for it. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. All I have to do is misrepresent Ben's position enough to pull the wool over enough people's eyes to keep me in that position.
Right. And that's where he's at right now. So I'm hoping that more of you go out and I'm hoping more of you go out and read this must-read article from Randy and comment. Randy Daly down in Kenai. You should go back and comment on it because again, there's a lot of what I think are probably conservative Republicans who are like, "Oh, you're dead to me. I can't believe you're suggesting this." Again, not understanding the nuances of what he's trying to say here. Somebody's got to talk about this, Brad. Somebody's got to talk about the plan, the fiscal policy, the plan that could get us out of this and all the pieces and parts, but nobody wants to touch it because they know it would stop the party for them, that it couldn't be business as usual.
Well, if Bjorkman's successful in this, in misrepresenting Ben's position, it's going to be a long time before we find somebody else who's willing to step up and propose an overall sane fiscal plan. We're just going to keep going down this road of more and more PFD cuts, more and more expansion of government, because the top 20%, the ones pushing the expansion of government, don't have to pay for it. We're just going to keep going more and more down that road. Ben and others in the fiscal policy working group tried to draw a line and say, look, we've got a solution to this. It involves, yes, we've now dug ourselves so big a hole that we've got to pay for part of it ourselves. We've got to pay for part of government ourselves. But here's a better way to do that. Here's a less burdensome way to do that. Here's a better way for 80% of Alaska families to do that. And that proposal is sort of the key to getting ourselves situated going forward in a way that does start bringing down government spending, does start curbing the appetite to spend more and more and more. If Bjorkman's successful in picking a piece out of that and saying, oh, shiny new toy, and misrepresenting what that does, misrepresenting what it is, arguing that it's an increase as opposed to a replacement, then it's going to be a long time before somebody else goes down the road of proposing an overall fiscal plan.
30 seconds here, Brad. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts are, look at who pays. Look who's talking about increased government spending and look at who pays. They don't match up. Those talking about increased government spending don't have to pay.
Yeah. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 comes to a close. Hour 2 is dead ahead. Chris Story is going to be joining us for Election Day and more. That's all right here. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Again, they keep acting like it's, and this has always been my fear when we talk about taxes. You and I have had this conversation back and forth many times that, my fear is that we're going to get some kind of tax in and they are going to tack it onto the top. That's why there has to be a constitutional spending limit. That's why there has to be other things in place that force it to become replacement revenue rather than additional revenue.
Yep, exactly right. And Ben's got it. Ben's got the plan, and others that were in that fiscal policy working group have the plan that brings that together, that replaces the most regressive tax ever proposed, according to Matt Berman, ICER economics professor Matt Berman, the most regressive tax ever proposed, PFD cuts, that replaces that with a less regressive tax, replaces that with a tax that takes less from middle and lower income Alaska families, 80% of Alaska families. Than PFD cuts, but also puts restrictions on spending so that you don't have, those who try to turn it into a pile on more.
And this is why you've advocated, instead of a sales tax, this is why you've advocated on a flat tax, right? So, 3% or whatever flat tax, because then it's an equitability issue, because then everybody pays the same amount of their income to help fund state government.
Yeah, Ben's proposed sales tax actually isn't that bad. It's still regressive, but what his broad-based tax is doing is picking up a lot of contribution from non-residents, from tourists, from business, frankly, who would be subject to the sales tax. He's picking up a lot of revenue from that, and so the amount of revenue that's being assigned to individuals, to families, is actually fairly low. It may be as much as only half the tax base is really families. And so that broad base tax, it's still regressive, but it actually may come out because of the broad base and because it's pushing so much away, it actually may come out to take less from Alaska families than even a flat tax. I'm doing that. That's going to be part of the Friday column to compare that. And Ben's proposal may actually even be better in that regard because of its broad base. And so it's a great proposal to have out there. It's one that needs to be treated seriously. And Bjorkman's misrepresentation of it. I mean, the guy's just not honest. Bjorkman's just not honest because he's claiming things that Ben isn't proposing. He's claiming that it sits on top of existing revenue sources. It doesn't. That's not what Ben's proposing. And so Bjorkman's getting desperate, can't defend his own position, can't defend the PFD cuts that he relies on,
right?
Because he doesn't have to pay for it. Can't defend his own position, and so he's just out there, just spinning stuff off, making stuff up about Ben's position that is just unconscionable.
Well, and he
dishonest and dishonest.
And he knows because it's a tender spot. He knows it's a sensitive spot for people on the right, the conservatives. Any talk of taxes, he knows it's a vulnerable point, and that's why he spins the lie into it and lets people draw their own conclusions. That's what he's doing here, and it is false, and it is misleading, and it's an outright fallacy. But all he has to do is throw it out there and then again, just go look at the comments on this article. And I was just shocked as I was reading it last night. And I'm like, man, these people are not getting it. Again, no nuance whatsoever. Oh, you talked about taxes, but I talked about taxes in a component of something else. And it's only contingent if we get these other things. And oh no, you talked about taxes, you're dead to me kind of thing.
See, this is where the Orwellianization of Alaska language is coming back to haunt us. PFD cuts are taxes. I mean, Randy can go off with whatever the hell he's going to do now, but PFD cuts are taxes. And to try to deny that then sets up Bjorkman being able to say, oh, well, he wants to do taxes. I don't want to do taxes. I only want to do PFD cuts. I don't want to do taxes. PFD cuts are taxes. We need to call a spade a spade.
I mean, that's the thing. Cindy said, Brad, I'll fly you to Kenai tomorrow just to call out Bjorkman at the meeting down there. She says she'll fly you down there if you want to come down there and call him out. I think that would be well worth it. And Kyle says, does this fiscal policy working group specifically call for statewide taxes or more nebulous new rev? There's two different sections of new revenue in the fiscal policy working group plan. One is a discussion on a tax structure, and they highlight the South Dakota tax model. The second thing is new revenue from resources and trying to expedite resources at timber and oil and minerals and looking at all those other things. So it does specifically talk about two different types of revenues in the fiscal policy working group plan, Brad.
Oh, Kyle the troll. I don't know how to deal with Kyle the troll. He's like Bjorkman. I mean, he's like Bjorkman. He makes stuff up to sort of, to get people spun off in a different direction.
He just
let's focus on the important thing. The important thing is Jesse Bjorkman is falsely claiming things about Ben's position that's just not true. And he's doing it because he can't defend his own position.
Right. Well, and that's going to be the tough one. We'll see if people buy it. We'll see if people jump into it and buy it. I'm hoping not. I think Ben's got a very good reputation on the peninsula as far as somebody who works very, very hard to try and keep Alaska's best interests at heart. And you can go back and look at what he did in Ways and Means this last year to try and make this happen, and just the enormous amount of pushback from the business as usual politicians who don't want the situation fixed. They like it the way it is, quite honestly. They like it the way it is. All right, Brad. Well, we're out of time. Thank you so much for coming on board as always.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Go have a drink now. Put a little Irish in your coffee and relax a little bit. And we'll talk again next week. Okay.
Great. Look forward.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. All right, folks. That does it for us in hour one. It's time to move on to hour two. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, Free Thinking Radio. We return with more in just a moment.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. Welcome to hour 2 of this Tuesday edition of the show. If you didn't catch hour 1 with Brad Keithley and Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets and the weekly top 3, I recommend you go back and listen to it on the podcast, which is available, well, wherever you find podcasts, CastBox, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Google, iTunes, wherever. And you'll find us there. And it was a lot of good discussion with Brad this morning on the problems that we're having and what this election may bring for us. And specifically, that last one is really getting my goat. The last of the weekly top 3, talking about the disingenuousness of Jesse Bjorkman's attack on Ben Carpenter, has really got me up in arms here, and we're gonna talk about that here in just a minute. In about 15 minutes or so, we'll be picking it up a little bit early with Chris Story. Why? Because today is election day. For those of you who live down on the peninsula and those who live in the interior, you guys are voting on your local elections, and that is for assembly members down on the peninsula. They're voting for mayor. They've also got that big bond issue down there on the Southern Peninsula Hospital. Up in Fairbanks, you've got the tax cap initiative as well that's being renewed. So now is the time to go out there and let your voice be heard. If you have not voted today, if you've not early voted, then today is the day. In fact, polls are open now, 7 a.m., 7 to 8, I think, right? So polls are open right now, and you should be able to go out there and vote on your way to work. So leave 10 minutes early today and go, or be late to work. I'm sorry, boss. I had to vote. I wanted to get it done. And remind everybody at work that you voted. And, you don't have to proselytize them there. You just say, hey, did you guys vote today? No? Make sure you vote on your way home. You don't have to tell them who to vote for or what to vote for. Get everybody involved. That's what we need to do. And it's super important. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this. I want to talk a little bit about this article. Randy Daly from down on the Kenai. He is a former member of the state chamber and the Kenai Chamber of Commerce. Randy and I have met several times. He's a pretty good dude, pretty sharp cookie. And he wrote this article, basically says, let's get the facts straight on Ben Carpenter's fiscal plan for state solvency. And he goes on to talk about the advertising campaign that Jesse Bjorkman has continued to push, that Ben Carpenter somehow wants to pile a 2% sales tax on top of everything else that's going on right now and basically push everybody out. And again, the problem here is this. It's there is no nuance or really accurate thought, analytical thought on this. Even in the chat room, Kyle said, well, tell me, does he support the tax or doesn't he? Well, again, it's conditional. He says, I'm just going to go through this for a second. Randy says, I'm writing to address a recent claim suggesting that candidate Ben Carpenter is in favor of a 2% state sales tax. The assertion is misleading and does not accurately reflect his position. He wants Alaska to have an operational fiscal plan. It's important to clarify that Carpenter introduced a bill proposing a 2% state sales tax as part of a broader fiscal reform package aimed at addressing our long-term financial challenges. It is not an endorsement of the sales tax in isolation, all by itself, but rather a component of a comprehensive strategy to balance state spending and revenue. He emphasized in the sponsor statement that the proposed sales tax is designed to be part of a structural reform package modeled after South Dakota's tax system. He highlighted the importance of a broad-based system that keeps rates low, simplifies compliance, and minimizes economic distortion. And also, I would also argue, create some equity in all those things. Carpenter has consistently stated also that he does not support any sales tax without a broader conversation about other fiscal measures, including cuts to current spending levels. He stated at a candidate forum that he explicitly stated that he would not consider statewide sales taxes alone. He also stressed the need for a mix of solutions, including reducing state spending and finding new revenue sources. And this is, again, in part for what the Fiscal Policy Working Group said. It had two components. It had a sales tax component based on the South Dakota model, but it also had another component saying we needed to generate new revenue from resources, timber, oil, mining, all those other things, that we need to work hard to develop new resources, new revenues from those resources. He is not looking to just have a sales tax and plonk it down on top of everything else. He said, in summary, the claims that Ben Carpenter's in favor of a 2% sales tax is a gross oversimplification of his position. And that's really the bottom line here. See, but the problem is that all people hear from Jesse Bjorkman is, oh, well, he's going to get this 2% sales tax and he's going to slap it on top of you with the PFD cuts and everything else. You're going to pay more. And here's the thing. It's working. This is why Jesse Bjorkman is doing this, because there are people out there who are ostensibly conservatives, Republicans, smaller government people, and all they hear is, oh, he's for a sales tax, then he's part of the problem. He says, here's a comment. I have a problem with the above statement. Quote, this proposal is not an endorsement of a sales tax in isolation, but rather a component of a comprehensive strategy to balance state spending and revenue. Is it just me, or does this sound like word salad? The proposal is not an endorsement of a sales tax in isolation. He's not talking about creating just a sales tax. Let me translate that for you. But rather a component of a comprehensive strategy to balance state spending and revenue. It's part of a bigger plan. It has more moving parts than just the 2% tax. So it's not word salad. I mean, I didn't realize that I would have to translate it for you, but there it is. He says, I don't know Ben Carpenter personally. Maybe he's a straight up guy. But he said the statement where it says Ben has consistently emphasized the need for a balanced approach that focuses on reducing state spending and growing the private economy doesn't jibe with increased taxation. Unless, of course, you've looked at the overall plan and see that it is a more equitable share of the cost of government spread out, and again, also puts a restriction on the size and scope of government. I mean, this is just one of the comments here. And you go through it, and it's over and over and over is just astonishing. These people who I would hope would take this deeper analysis and not just be put off by the word tax, right? I mean, I've been chastised on this show. I can't believe you talk about taxes on your show. How dare you talk about? We're already being taxed. They're taking over 50% of your PFD. How is that? How do you not see that as when you've got a family that's making $50,000 a year and they're taking $2,000 per person for you and mom, or mom and dad and one kid or whatever, and they're taking 10 or 12% of your overall income? How is that not a tax? How are you not outraged by that? And he's talking about a 2% sales tax that's essentially a consumption tax, and then reducing and putting all these other strictures on it so that you can get part of your PFD back. That's not, 12%, 2%, 12%, 2%, which is greater. It's madness. I'm just, it's just crazy. We see this over and over and over again. Somebody says Ben Carpenter must be voted out of office. A sales tax is highly regressive and a pain for business owners who have to contend with it. Worse, there's no such thing as a structural plan regarding state spending. The Alaska Constitution allows the legislature to do what it wants with each budget as long as the budget is balanced. Unless you put, again, there is a fiscal plan. The Fiscal Policy Working Group called for a constitutional spending cap. They called for constitutional protections for the PFD. They can do whatever they want on the statutory side, but constitutionally, they would be restricted to doing only certain things. They would have to pay a PFD. They couldn't grow the government beyond whatever the spending cap said, and that means if they want to continue to do these things, they're going to either have to, one, find more revenue from the people and justify their position on it, or two, cut things back. Ben must be voted out of office. Ben is one of the hardest working legislators in there, working for you to try and protect the private economy. I'm just reading through these comments and I'm like, I've seen some of these names on the comments before, and usually these guys are, usually they're, this is an echo chamber of conservative thought, right? That's must read. Occasionally you get a troll in there, but usually it's an echo chamber. And here they are eating their own because they don't understand the whole proposal. They cannot understand the nuances of it's not just a tax by itself. Dunleavy and this idiot belong in the same grouping. Wow. There are some good comments in there. I'm voting for Carpenter. He's more fiscally conservative than Bjorkman to date. Carpenter has not sided with liberal Democrats like Bjorkman has. Carpenter is also not trying to give the legislature more power like Bjorkman did. He also was against the pay increase. That's another thing. I trust Carpenter more than I do Bjorkman as a legislator. Okay, so this whole thing. But again, I am just shocked that these people can't that a comprehensive plan. It's part of a larger, more comprehensive strategy that has many moving parts. It's not just one thing. But I guess that's what we get for having TikTok and Twitter and all these other things where it's only 148 characters or 30 seconds and all you can do is all we can think about is one thing. We can't think about things in combination or something that is broader or bigger. It blows my mind. And the other thing that blows my mind is all the Republicans out there who say, well, if you say tax, you're dead to me. Tax. We should talk about it because it is inevitable. If we continue the way that we're going right now, there will be no PFD. It will all be consumed. And then the following year, or maybe the year after, they'll look you straight in the eye and say, free rides die hard, baby. You Alaskans need to start paying your fair share for state government. And we will be paying taxes. It's coming. You can't just la, 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 la. You can't just put your fingers in your ears and ignore it. We best start talking about it. And I hope that most of you go out and comment on this story. I hope more of you do. I hope more of you go out there and try and make an argument that makes sense. Because this kind of ridiculousness just irritates me. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Chris Story's up next. Election Day. It's all dead ahead. Right here.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Oh, lost my light. I've lost the light. Show me the light. There we go. Sorry about that. I don't think nuance is the right word. It's more like reading the whole thing. They just hit the paragraph about taxes and shut down. Yeah. I'm with you. Kyle says, so taxes on industry and residents doesn't sound very conservative to me. Show me another state that doesn't have taxes on industry, even the most conservative states. Show me where. Is taxation theft? Absolutely. But if we want some form of government, there has to be at least a minimal amount of taxation on everything. And it should be fair and equitable. I'm sorry. I'm just going through here. I hope more of you share the Must Read Alaska story. So many uninformed voters out there believing Jesse. Yeah, I'll post there's the link to the Must Read story one more time. I'll put that right there. I'm going through here. We have to be, and this is Elena. Elena wins the internet today. We have to be willing to talk about the painful stuff, because if we're not, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot. That's the thing. Avoidance is not a strategy. Avoidance is not a strategy. It's not a winning strategy. It's a short term. I mean, it works for a little bit until you get hit with it. That's what happens. Oh, man, I'm just so agitated by this at this point. Hello?
Good morning. Yeah. Wow. Good morning to you, too. I'm so agitated. Son of a nutcracker.
Son of a nutcracker.
Oh, Michael Dukes.
You farging bastages, you ice holes. What? I'm sorry, what?
Wow. This got real.
Do you remember that movie? I think it was Bugsy Malone, where they didn't, I think it was Bugsy Malone. They didn't swear, but everything sounded like a swear, right? You farging bastages. What?
That's funny.
It's
never heard it.
You never
some strange things.
Oh man, when I was a kid growing up, there was some funny stuff out there. Okay. All right. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm still reading the comments. Donna, thank you for the clarity. Neither Brad nor Michael want to actually say those words. What words was? Oh, Ways and Means also passed a spending limit that would have required spending reductions. Ben's sales tax bill also included a corporate impact tax cuts and property tax cuts. I don't know what you are trying to get me to say, Kyle, but I won't say it because you can't make me. Oh, Johnny Dangerously. Thank you, Jim. That's the name of the movie, was Johnny Dangerously. That's right, Michael Keaton. Oh, man. Okay. So there you go, Chris. There's your homework for the weekend. You got to go find the movie Johnny Dangerously. And
must have been mid 80s, huh?
Yeah, it was like late 80s, I think, something like that. A lot of fun. All right. Well, I have invited you here today to make you an offer you can't refuse. We're going to talk.
Get out of my head. I was just thinking about Marlon Brando in The Godfather, and he didn't remember his lines, so they always had lines like posted up in a tree if he was outside or somewhere where he could literally look up and see them. I was just thinking that. I was thinking he never could have starred in a film where he had to remember whatever you just said about ice and passages and things. They could have never done it.
It could have never, ever done it. Well, that's okay. That's okay.
And there you made me an offer I can't refuse.
I've made you an offer I can't refuse. So we're going to talk a little bit about election stuff, and then you'll give us our life coaching lesson today. Let's do it. Let's jump into it with both feet right in the chest. Just jump right on it with both feet right on the chest. All right, Chris Story, our guest, the Michael Duke Show. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things that I'm asking you to do all the time. Let's get to it. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Yep. Welcome back to the program. It is the Michael Duke Show Tuesday edition. Normally, Chris' story is only in the second segment because that's about all we can take. But today I invited him. I invited him in for a little bit extra because today is election day, and this is an important day, Chris. I got to be honest. I was down in Homer this weekend, and I bumped into a couple people, and then I was reading one of the Homer communications groups on Facebook or whatever, and people were talking and asking about the hospital bond and everything else. And I was just afraid that this thing was just going to pass as a rubber stamp because who doesn't care about healthcare, right? Everybody cares about it, but I think people are waking up. Thanks in part to your interview with Dr. Raymond and Ryan Smith from SPH, and that was shared all over Facebook. I saw that going on. People were really getting an earful and starting to get some details. But there's a lot of things happening, and elections are important. I know people feel like they should just throw their hands up and walk away in disgust because they're so frustrated with everything, but election day is important. It's not election day. It's the last day it's election day. My God, people just want to split hairs sometimes. It's officially election day. Everything else was early voting. Today is election day. Chris, I give the floor to you.
It energizes me. I don't mind when people early vote. Obviously, I'm not a big fan of mail-in or Facebook drop boxes and so forth, but I love the idea of election day, showing up on that day, going in and casting a ballot for something as important as this hospital bond, or voting for Jim Anderson for mayor, or whatever it is when we go in November for defeating ranked choice and reelecting President Trump. Either doesn't matter. It's the same level of freedom you get to exercise, and it shows courage. It really does take courage. And if you've got to go in and early vote for your own reasons, great, no problem. I'm glad you can do it. But I'm with you. This is election day. It's exciting. It is a day that you and I get to exercise the freedoms that we know we were born with, but that are enshrined and protected in our founding documents. And this more perfect union gets better with more participation. How is it that we have such a lethargic turnout on these municipal elections? I do not know. It is just confounding to me, because this is where you could really make an impact on your own life.
I will argue, Chris, that that's a feature, not a bug. Okay, that they have separated the municipal elections out from the general elections to basically make it harder, to confuse people. People think election day is, the Mat-Su finally aligned their election day with the general election. Why does Anchorage hold their municipal elections in April, right? Why is Fairbanks doing it in October? Why is the KPP doing it why don't we just all have it on one day on one ballot? I'm with you. And I know there's a lot of people out there who are like, oh, you need to go out and early vote. I have only absentee voted once. It was because I was out of state during election day, and I literally had to hunt down a fax machine to get the absentee thing from the state of, this is back 20 years ago. I had to hunt down a fax machine to send off our votes, my wife and I's votes, on election day on an absentee thing with the state of Alaska, whatever it was. But that was the only time. I like you, I'm going to go on the day. I'm going to make my voice count. I'm going to do what I need to do. But like I said, I think it's a feature. This is intentional. They know that if they separate out the days, they'll get a lower turnout in the general election because people feel like, geez, how many times do I have to vote? And maybe that's the wrong attitude for people to have, but that's just the reality of human nature.
And this is, I don't want to say this is the most important election, but it has the deeper impact on your own life. We know that, for example, you mentioned the hospital bond, and that's going to have a real significant impact despite the marketing and the best efforts of a really slick marketing campaign. It is going to increase your property taxes. And if you're renting, it is necessarily going to increase your rent. I promise you, if and when this passes, there is going to be a rental increase simply for the fact that landlords are already, it feels like, oh, rents have gone up. Rents go up commensurate with the necessity of increasing and increasing costs of property tax, utilities that are being provided, cost of insurance, cost of maintenance, everything's going up. We can't control the amount of money printed in Washington, D.C., but we can control the amount of money printed in our own backyard. As such, too much money chasing too few goods creates a higher inflation, and you can economically destroy yourself with overburdening your own neighbors with these kinds of debts. This is the largest bond ever issued by the hospital, and we're being told, I believe, misled in that somehow local health care is at stake and on the line, and we're going to lose this hospital if we don't vote for this. And I talked to many people who are directly in charge of the marketing, the hospital, on the board, and I've told them as such very personally without offense, and I think we can all do this and kind of have these backyard conversations with people that matter and just say, this is disingenuous marketing, and I disagree wholeheartedly with your approach. Therefore, I'm voting no. I'm not saying no to the hospital. I'm saying no to this massive $52 million tax increase. And if you're renting, you need to be thinking the same thing. I say rent like you own, because one day you will. And the more kinds of local taxes we increase on each other, the farther off that day may be.
Well, and look, you're a real estate guy, and you deal with rentals and properties for sale and everything else. But suss this out, because I always hear people say, especially people who rent, well, I'll vote for this because I don't pay property taxes as a renter.
You do.
And I've never understood that mentality. Even when I rented, I understood that no landlord is going to just eat the tax because out of the goodness of their heart, right? I mean, that's all wrapped up. If taxes go up, your rent will go up, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. Insurance, taxes, all of these things go into consideration when rents are reset. Absolutely. So that's it. Everybody's involved in this. And just going back to the hospital bond real quick, I talked to too many people that have not realized, well, I don't have the assemblyman is running unopposed in my area and I can't vote because, I live out Easton Road. I can't vote on the hospital bond. Yes, you can. It is a massive service area from the Niltic all the way south out to Rosdolna and parts of across the bay. So it's a massive footprint. So anybody who's thinking this isn't about you and your taxes, think again. It's service area wide, not city of Homer.
And you know what kills me is the misinformation. And I know we've overused that word, but and I'm going to call it misinformation instead of a flat out lie. But I mean, I've heard it. We saw the borough mayor in a comment in the news story back in June in the Peninsula Clarion saying, "Oh, this will reduce your healthcare costs." We've seen other people who've been defending it saying this is going to reduce the health. And you had Ryan Smith on your show, and you asked him directly, "Is this going to reduce?" No, this won't reduce healthcare costs. So what is the point of it if it's not, we're going to expend $52 million to just have more expensive healthcare in the future? More expensive healthcare than 60 miles away, 70 miles away? How does that make any sense at all?
Well, to your point, relative to misinformation, we got quite an earful during the last several years that we now know that there are terms such as misinformation, malinformation, disinformation, all of these kinds of things. And so in my line of work, we have some latitude with marketing a property. We can use what's called puffery within reason. In other words, great emerging view. All right. Look, there's some trees that are dying and falling down. And as they do, it's going to get better. but it's not a great view. So you get to use some terminology to sort of catch the eye or ear of somebody and that you're marketing to. It's called puffery, but then there's something where you cannot go beyond, which would be to misinform a consumer, and we're highly regulated in that. But I find it mind-boggling that in this case, your tax dollars to the tune of $100,000, I've heard more, but let's just say $100,000 of your tax dollars are going towards marketing back to you this tax increase. But notice that the brochure, anybody who received the brochure in the service area, it never once mentions mill rate, that your tax mill rate will not go up beyond 2023 levels. It says tax rate will not go up. So it's by inference or by, I guess, omission of the word mill. It's just kind of ignoring the fact that your taxes are going up necessarily because your assessments just went through the roof in 2024. I'm talking 60%, 80% in many cases. So this is a tax increase. And so that's misinformation and misinforming. The other piece of it is they never once mentioned the $38.5 million on that document. Not one spot on that letter that went out to every box holder in the area did it mention that not just the with interest of 52 million, but the actual amount of 38.5. And that to me is absolutely disingenuous. And so I'll continue to use that word and gladly have this conversation with the board president, as I've had, and with the CEO. And I think they need to go back to zero. Mayor Machicki forced their hand. He admitted as much on my show. He said, look, the hospital came to me when I first became there. They wanted a $15 million bond for maintenance. I said, nope, that's not enough. Let's go and get a plan together for the future of this hospital and come back to me with a plan. He then took over negotiations with a property owner, and he negotiated the $13 million with that property owner, and he wasn't able to close the deal. Mayor Machicki couldn't close the deal, couldn't get a signed agreement, couldn't get a letter of intent. And so we have this question mark on the ballot relative to the acquisition. Never mind whether you think it's a good idea or not to acquire the property.
Right.
Did you know there's no agreement?
Right.
There's no agreement, then it shouldn't be on the ballot.
Right. If there's no written agreement, it shouldn't be on the ballot. And oh, by the way, why is the property valued at, 50% more or 70% more than what the actual street value is? I mean, who came up with these valuations? I mean,
Well, and you raised a great point. What is the actual fair market value? I helped I was engaged by the hospital about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And because I had a property listed inside the medical district that they had interest in. And not only, Michael, would they not make a formal offer to the property owner until there was an appraisal done. They had the appraisal done on the taxpayer dime. They paid for the appraisal and wouldn't make an offer a penny over that. Not a penny over the appraised value. And so then the seller did agree. Okay, fine, I'll sell it to you at appraised value. They withdrew for other reasons from the contract, but we did have a written contract. So I just don't understand how we're being told that this is so vital to the future of our own healthcare, and yet it wasn't vital enough to get a contract before you put it on the ballot.
Right.
Why not? And what will the ultimate cost of these properties be? We don't know.
Right. And again, the final question to me is always, does this improve healthcare, both the quality of healthcare and the cost? Because again, if it's 2 or 3 times the cost of if I could drive 70 miles away and get it for half price or 2/3, or if I could drive a couple hundred miles away and get it for less than half, I mean, unless I'm bleeding out on the spot, guess what I'm doing? Because why does that make any sense? Yeah. I mean, it's exorbitant, the cost of healthcare today. It's one of our largest cost drivers in our lives.
I've got, like everybody, we've all got stories, people whose lives have been saved by the amazing services and amazing staff that we have at our local hospital, and that we're forever grateful for that. We've paid for it, and we've all built it as a community, and we continue to pay. But I'm very, very grateful for that. And just as many stories on the other side. For example, I know Dr. Raymond, the only people that have refuted Dr. Raymond being on my program actually have kind of a personal thing with him, which I find interesting. But That notwithstanding, he and a former partner of his had gone bankrupt, and to offset some of the stuff that was going on with he and his remaining partner, they decided to sell their X-ray machine to the hospital. And this is prior administration, so it's nothing on the current administration, but it's an example, if you will, of what happens. So he sells the X-ray machine to the hospital. Now, his X-ray would have cost you $350, and the hospital's pricing was matching that, was commensurate at $350. The day after he sold them the machine, the cost of that same set X-ray in this town went to $650 the next day. And so it's about competition, driving out competition, driving up the monopolistic practices. All the while we're being told this is better for you. But the reality is, I have a friend who just went to Anchorage to have a knee MRI, some damage done to their knee. And I said, well, why aren't you having that MRI done here? Well, it's literally 2/3 more to do it here. And I said, yeah, but you've got insurance. And she said, I don't care. It's the principle. I'm not paying it. I can wait. I'm driving Anchorage and have it done up there. And that's going to continue to happen even if we pass this. So I think we need to go back to the basics of what is this critical access hospital for? What are the services very specifically that we want them to provide? And what are we willing to pay for? Today's going to determine a piece of that question.
Chris Story is our guest. Get out and vote today. I think, as Chris has mentioned, vote for whatever you want, but at least get out and let your voice be heard. Again, you've got the hospital bond. You've got mayor's race. I met Jim Anderson on Saturday. Great guy. Enjoyed talking to him. Lots of good options out there. Go do it. We got more coming up. Hour 2 finishes up. Chris Story going to come back with our life coaching lesson right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Chris Story is our guest. We're in the break right now. Elena says, I said the other day it was cheaper for me to have a major surgery, open abdominal surgery down in the lower 48 that included airline, hotel, per diem, and a small incentive for the cost of the surgery that was cheaper than a 30-minute procedure at the hospital here in town, as nice as the staff is for a simple biopsy. It was cheaper to fly down, have a hotel room, do all the everything else. And I mean, that's, and that's kind of the craziness of it. When you've got things that, if it costs 2/3 less, if you're paying 30% of the same bill and you only have to drive, a couple hours away, 3 hours. I mean, that's madness, Chris. Absolute madness.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it really is. And I think a lot of us are starting to wake up a little bit to hold on. And the Mayor Matricky referred to me as the king of irrelevance because I brought up to balance this in the minds of the voter. I said, look, do you realize we're still paying off a $5 million bond, which actually now seems cheap, seems like pocket change, $5 million bond for building our brand new police station. We are faced with a potential harbor expansion bond. If that gets approved, there's going to be at least a $30+ million bond on the people for the balance of the 280 or 300 million that is going to be paid by the state and federal government. Thank you very much. In addition to massive tax increases that we've just experienced this year relative to our assessed values going up. In addition to the Herc building, which is where it was an old middle school that the borough sold us for $1, which is sort of like going up to, a far-flung village, the top of Alaska with no road access and giving them a Lamborghini. And by the way, you got to insure this Lamborghini for full market value, by the way, and you can't drive it anywhere. And by the way, there's no engine in it. And it's covered in lead-based paint and riddled with asbestos. Good luck with that Lamborghini. So we get this for $1. We know we're going to be faced with some sort of a recreation plan for a convention center or a recreation center that's going to cost us, I don't know, 20, 30 million. I don't know, but it's going to be bonded, a big piece of it. We know that. And so all of that should be on the hearts and minds of anybody going to vote today on this $52 million bond. And it is okay to say no to the bond and yes to local health care and yes to a hospital that can provide emergency services and a lot of other basic quality services that they are offering.
You bring those things up and he calls you the king of irrelevance?
He said, you're becoming the king of irrelevance. But at first he said he loved me. So I think that made it all okay. But he also said, relative to the voting population down here in the Nilchik South, there's a whole lot of you I don't like. And if you vote for this, I'm not going to like you anymore. And he was making the point that he's not impugning anybody who's against it or for it. But in Peter fashion, he just laid it all out there on the line. And whatever you think of him, you can't say that he's quiet or short. He'll tell you exactly what he thinks of you right to your face.
Oh man, I just this is astonishing. And of course, the thing is like that, if you don't, if you're not in the city, you're not voting on the mayor race, you've got an incumbent in running unopposed in the assembly seat. So there's really not a lot, but this is important. I mean, this is going to affect property owners for years. I mean, this is a 20-year bond for $50 million. It's
52 with interest. It's gonna and it'll impact property values here in the area, the localized area right around the hospital. The mayor and I just don't think we were talking on the same page. I'm not really sure what he meant, but he felt like the property values would go up if we didn't pass this in that area, and it's completely antithetical to the market realities. So I should have pushed him further on what he meant by that, but I'll just say this. Everybody needs to sort of rejigger their thoughts on fair market value if this passes, and thinking in terms of, okay, we've never, ever seen any purchase or sale through the Kenai Peninsula Borough that anybody's pointed out to me, and I've asked everybody where they've used net present value, but that may become the future. And if you've ever had your property taken, like we did a few years ago when Lake Street was expanded, they did not use 3 times or 5 times or any sort of times multiple of market value. You get dollars per square foot. There's no great net present value equation there. And I've got the receipts to prove that.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, this reminds me of, I got property up in Fairbanks, and it reminds me of the arguments where they tore down a school that we were still paying a bond on. We still had 5 or 6 years of a bond payment on, and then they built a brand new school. Instead of maintaining the old one, they tore it down and built a whole nother one while we were still, it just taxed.
Well, one of the three buildings that we're going to bond here is going to be torn down as well.
Yeah, exactly. Kathy said, I know that. She said, I had a colonoscopy last year at SPH. The bill was $7,800. My insurance paid $1,800. I was told that it's $1,800 in Washington State. You could have flown to Washington State, had a couple-day vacation before you had your colonoscopy. Anyway, it's madness. All right, Chris, what's the well, we're going to jump into it here. We'll figure out what you're going to teach us today. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go. All right, we're back. Chris Story is our guest, the man from Homer. Don't forget, folks, go out and vote today. It's voting day. Go out and vote. No matter, if you're in the Kenai or up in Fairbanks, it's voting day. So go out and vote. Make sure your voice is heard. Chris, what's your lesson for today? What kind of life coaching are you going to hit us with? You soothe my savage soul today. What do we got?
That's a good line. I like that. That's a good T-shirt. That makes some great merch.
Yeah, great merch. Soothe my savage soul. What?
Or you could just put savage.
Savage. I've actually got a T-shirt that says "Savage Gentleman" on it. That's what I'm all about. That's where I'm at. All right. What's the story for today?
It's going to sound cliche. Maybe you've heard this before, but I'm going to use this phrase anyway. Only you can prevent forest fires. Only you can prevent governmental overreach. Only you can prevent the scope creep of local government, state government, and ultimately the federal government. It is up to you. We forget, I think, because we are so far afield, we're so far removed from what happens in DC. We get to know Dan Sullivan, and he will kiss babies and meet and greet all over the state of Alaska during election season. Then he's back in DC, and we become isolated and removed from the decisions that he and Lisa and Mary are making. They'll come back and report to us, but we're removed from it. And so we forget the actual impact we have on a local basis. So I think it's, yes, today's a local election day, but it's also the day where you get to use your voice. You get to use your voice as it pertains to your small town, and having the grit and the courage to stand up for what you believe in and prevent a forest fire where you are. You've got a cup of water in your hand. It's like a bucket brigade. You can put out a little bit, not all of it, but you can put out a little bit you can. And if you do something, and I hate, this is another cliche, but I'm going to use it anyway. I like to co-opt their language. Think global, act local. That means with your investments, think about global situations. For example, why is China buying so much of U.S. farmland? How is that even possible? Outside of a little town in Florida called Chiefland, there was a farmer who sold a great big tract of land to a Chinese company, and they were going to raise monkeys on that property and send them back to China for laboratory testing. And the people of Chiefland, Florida, the people of Levy County said, not in my backyard. That ain't happening. And they put a stop to it. So they thought globally and acted locally. You and I need to be thinking about the wealth that is being consumed and the property that's being subsumed by BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, these massive Goliath companies that are just absorbing as much single family housing as they can across our country. Only you can stop that by saying no. I'm not going to sell to that organization, number one. Two, I'm going to buy my own backyard. I'm going to start a business in my own backyard. I'll supply the goods, the services. I'll buy that local business. There's millions of local businesses that are going to be sold all around this country as boomers are set to retire, and not necessarily next generation wants to take over. So there's an opportunity for you to own more of your backyard, to control more of your backyard, be it in owning 4 homes,
right?
We, preach and teach in the Backyard Millionaire, or buying or building a business. There's going to be a lot of transfer of local business. Let's make sure it stays local. Let's make sure we think global, act local. Think global means beware of what's going on globally. Beware of globalization of enterprises and all of the monies that are being spent from around the world invested into these hedge funds, and then taking over your backyard, taking over your main street. Don't let it happen. Only you can prevent the forest fire of this kind of globalization.
I get, it's one of the things that's always struck a note with me was the Backyard Millionaire philosophy of, owning 4 properties, or it's depending on where you live, 3 properties or 2 properties or whatever it is, to hit that millionaire level of net worth. But it's the one thing that I've talked about politically, right? You can only affect what's going on in your hometown, really. I mean, we could focus on the national stuff and what's going on and everything that's happening in Washington, D.C. But to me, that's just, over the years, I've realized that's just more bread and circuses than anything else. The only thing we have reasonably direct control on is what's happening in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our cities, our boroughs, our states. Maybe is about as high as we can go. But we seem to ignore what happens in our own backyard a lot of times, because we're so busy frothing at the mouth and being, and being consumed by what's happening at a national or global level. We have to be aware of it, but we should be focusing on our own backyard.
Absolutely. And I think our power is, just imagine concentric circles, almost like a target. And on the outer circle, you have less influence. As you get closer to the inner circle, you've got the most influence. So if you think about the national elections and the Federal Reserve and everything else, and the potential of a digital currency, a national digital currency, all these kinds of things, that's on the outer circle. As you get closer and closer to the center of this concentric set of circles is your local mayor. This is why we're voting for Jim Anderson. This is why we're voting against the bond. That said, inside that tight little center of the circle of this whole, target is your influence on people who are going to be voting nationally. So you can share the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. Share that with people. Share the knowledge about how the Federal Reserve was actually created and the intent and what's behind it and what's actually going on with monetary policy. Share it with people that are going to go in and pull a lever in November for our next president. You can have an influence. If we all do that on a local basis, we can have a massive influence on setting aside personalities. This isn't about Kamala's cackle. This isn't about Tim Walz wanting tampons put in all the boys' bathrooms. This is not about personalities. This is about the future of our democracy, the future of our representative republic using democracy, but it's the future of our country. And we can have a local conversation, one-on-one, not shouting at each other on Facebook, not shouting at each other at all, just literally talking and saying, do you realize what this porous border could mean relative to the next 9/11? Talking to neighbors, just being able to think globally, think nationally, act local, converse local, how to win friends and influence your neighbors is critical and so important. I think that's something you can do at a local level to impact the outcome at a national level.
Yeah, because we need to refocus, because a lot of times there's things locally that we're just, we could tell you exactly what's going on in the Beltway right now in D.C., but we couldn't tell you what's happening at the next PTA meeting or the next borough assembly or city council meeting because we're not paying attention. And that's where we get lost. And again, government is what happens to you when you stop paying attention. Right? That's
you're busy making the money to pay the taxes and the CEO of the hospital and Mayor McChickey, everybody's told me on down, hey, these are all open meetings. Anybody could have come.
Yeah.
Reality is most people don't, but that's on us. So let's pay attention and let's tell them today that we caught our attention and we're going to pay a lot closer attention.
60 seconds, Chris. Final thoughts here, my friend Chris Story.
I think remembering that we're neighbors, even if you fundamentally disagree with somebody politically or what have you, meaning only you can put out fire, prevent forest fires means don't start one either. This isn't about a culture of personalities, really, or a cult of personalities. It's about a difference of opinion, learning to become persuasive. I'd encourage anybody to read books like How to Win Friends and Influence People and become more persuasive where you are, with what you've got and who you're already talking to.
The Art of Verbal Judo. That's one of my favorite books. If you haven't read that one, that's a good one. The Art of Verbal Judo and How to Win Friends and Influence People. Both good stuff. All right, Chris Story, the man from Homer, thank you so much for sharing with us your thoughts today, my friend. Now go out and vote, okay?
Got it. Jimmy Anderson.
All right. Jimmy Anderson and no on one, right? That's it is. All right. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Folks in the interior, don't forget tax cap today, plus all those assembly seats. Now's the time to go out and let your voice be heard. We will see you tomorrow, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Any final words of wisdom, Chris, before I let you go and cut you loose today?
No, that's it, Michael. Great job. Thank you. Again, I know a lot of people are, I'm putting myself, I think it takes courage to have the conversation you and I are having here, and a lot of people around the service area having this conversation. It takes courage, and I just remind people that, again, I think even the people that are proponents of, say, this hospital bond have the best of intentions. I think they really do. They do not have nefarious or otherwise intentions. They just aren't aligning, I think, with the majority's opinion. And we'll find out today. We're going to find out before it's over. But they're our neighbors, they're our friends. Let's be respectful as we disagree.
I will say last week I was pretty much discouraged and thought that people were going to vote for it. And then again, after this weekend, I'm cautiously optimistic that people are seeing through the smoke and mirrors. And it's due in large part to that interview you had between Dr. Raymond and Ryan Smith. I think that really opened a lot of people's eyes. So keep doing the good work, my friend. You are doing a yeoman's job down there of keeping everything local and keeping your backyard clean. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. On you. Take care.
All right. We'll see you later. Thanks so much. Okay, folks. Well, tomorrow it'll be Mike Shower and somebody else. I think I might try and bring a Ben Carpenter on again to talk a little bit more about this sales tax thing, because it's become such an ugly wound. I I think I'd like to talk to him about it and see what he has to say. Maybe we'll bring him on tomorrow or Thursday. And then, of course, we're only 4 weeks away from the general election. So this is where things are going to get hot and sweaty. That was kind of ugly, wasn't it? Gross. Hot and sweaty. All right, we're going to continue tomorrow. Thank you for coming on board. Be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.